Welcome to Carbon Conversations, a podcast by Biochar Life, where we explore the cutting edge of environmental solutions, from biochar to smart agriculture to the climate tech revolution. We sit down with experts and business leaders at the forefront of change. This is your host, Matt Rickard. David, how you doing? Good evening. Good to see you.
I'm grand. Yourself, Matt? How are you doing?
I'm very well. It's not too early. Sometimes I'm doing these calls at ridiculous times, but it's 8 o'clock in the morning because you've very, very generously taken a late night shift. So I appreciate that.
It's no problem at all. It's lovely to chat.
Cool. Look, I'm looking forward to this because I know there's been a lot happening in your world for the last 6 months, which we'll dig into. And we know each other well. But before doing that, I think for the audience who may not be so familiar, with all your work, maybe just give us a quick overview of PlantVillage and the other things you're doing, your mission, the stuff you've been doing with Penn State and PlantVillage.
Yeah. My name is David Hughes. I'm a reformed rainforest ecologist who gave up my work in rainforest ecology to work on food security and climate change because everything else is rearranging the deck chairs on the Titanic. I work very much in the global south, so think of across Africa, helping farmers increase the productivity in their fields, and then also trying to turn the non-consumed biomass of those farms into durable carbon credits. Moving towards a future whereby somebody in the global north, ourselves, for example, would be able to offset our carbon directly with a smallholder farmer in the global south, no middlemen, direct payments, and then being able to enable the people who have contributed the least to climate change to be able to benefit from the investments which are being made into cleaning up all of this mess.
Cool. So let's dive into, obviously, we have a lot of commonalities and overlap. We've known each other probably for 2.5 years now, and the work we do with smallholder farmers in Africa and here in Asia more and more. Actually, this year we're seeing a lot of exciting growth, I think, in Thailand and in Indonesia and other parts of Southeast Asia. And we've been somewhat unaffected, I think, as Biochar Life with the whole kind of dismantling of USAID. But I know for you, definitely it's been impactful in various ways. I'm really interested to understand how and hear the positives and the negatives, because I'm sure it's probably changing how you're doing things. And when I asked for a title of the podcast, I forget it exactly, but it was, I think, something like the impact of biochar in a post-USAID world. Obviously, by the time people are watching this, they'll see that title. But when you talk about a post-USAID era or world, what do you mean by that? What are the implications for agricultural development, climate resilience? What are you seeing? Let's unpack some of that.
Yeah, just for your viewers to understand, I was directing a USAID innovation lab called Current and Emerging Threats to Crops, built upon PlantVillage at Penn State. And it was very successful. Like the other innovation labs, there's about 17 across the United States, and really a big hallmark of U.S. foreign aid policy. The United States is renowned for its ability to conduct research and has done that very effectively also in agricultural settings. And so since 1961, USAID has been in operation. And over the last 10, 15 years, they've had this large flagship program called Feed the Future. And so we were helping people cope with pests and diseases using applied research. And a really great way to do that was to turn the infected material, so think of a corn or a maize plant which is infected by something, you could turn that into biochar through the process of pyrolysis, which Biochar Life and others have really advanced so well. And that all came to a screeching halt on the 24th of January when Elon Musk with his wood chipper or chainsaw, depending on which week it was, just dismantled a really, really excellent suite of interventions for applied research. And not only that but has also brought to close essentially USAID with lots of other people. This was all written down beforehand. Project 2025 outlined how they would do that. The one of the richest men in the world, if not the richest, is now probably likely to be contributing to the deaths of hundreds of thousands of children based upon various research. But it's over. And so then the question is, what is the effect?
Yeah.
The effect on children, the effect on medication, the effect on immediate relief. For us, thinking of the ability to increase food productivity through applied research and then leverage that better growth of food into increasing carbon capture. It has been catastrophic. It has been $9 million wiped off for proposed work overnight, but probably 25-30 million dollars into the future.
Mm.
But I think we're well insulated because about a year beforehand, back in March 2024, feeling as I did that government was not a stable partner because of what I had seen Sweden, one of the EU nations, doing in the face of the importance of funding Ukraine, they switched from funding work in Africa.
Mm.
But because of that, I felt that government was not stable as a partner. I didn't figure out how unstable it might be, but it turns out my intuition was quite good, and we were able to set up PlantVillage Plus, which is a private company, to be scaling up biochar through the markets, which is kind of the kind of work that Biochar Life and others do as well. Carboneers, there's lots of people in that space.
Yeah, like well, firstly, sorry that you've had to go through that, and it's I keep a pretty close eye across the media and all of this stuff, and you don't hear these stories, in terms of this dismantling. All you hear is where money was maybe not so well spent. You do not hear all of these stories where it was extremely well spent. So yeah, it's obviously a real shame. And what's I suppose the bounce back now? Are you seeing, when you look at the work you do and the work in country, are you looking at, kind of more of a locally led type initiatives, although it was always locally led anyway, but in terms of how you run your models now, PlantVillage Plus, PlantVillage, are you focused more on the kind of in-country growth of those projects?
Yeah, we were always very localized. So we developed systems whereby local young people would be setting up private companies in the countries we work, Kenya, Tanzania, etc. And then we, as the parentship, would be providing the infrastructure through Plant Village, through AI, and through other tools that we have. We've had to massively pull back
Yeah.
in a variety of countries. We were in 12 countries. We pulled back to essentially three major countries. We've had an anonymous donor come in, which is going to help us expand a little, which is great. We're working with the Gates Foundation, and we had previously been working with them. And they, of course, have very nicely and very well put up a lot more investment, and Bill is proposing excuse me, to spend down everything in 25 years, which is great. I think the Gates Foundation have really stepped up.
Mm.
um, but it has accelerated our approach whereby we're really focusing on customers who can pay, and that is not the smallholder farmer. So we're
Yeah.
we're having to pivot rapidly to commercial farms exporting flowers to the UK and EU markets. So I didn't get into the game of food security in Africa to help the Brits have flowers in their florists. I mean, no offense, but that wasn't what I was after. But necessity is the mother of invention, and so we're learning a lot, and we're able to generate revenue. And we hope that having a large customer like the flower exporting market will allow us to come back to the smallholders, which we plan to do in this upcoming short rain seasons in Kenya. So needs must. But we want to make sure that we can grow, be sustainable in the absence of aid, which means have revenue, but at the same time, make sure we don't get distracted by the revenue, that we're not going
Sure.
to
Yeah.
chase this huge, huge market.
Yeah, makes sense. What is your view on the carbon markets generally now? In I know you do a lot more than that. We're kind of bought in purely on that in terms of a revenue model for yourself. You kind of have different paths of revenue. But what is your view now on the carbon markets, Africa, smallholder farmers? Do you feel we're moving forward with the kind of artisan model and smallholder farmers? Are you kind of hopeful of where that's going? We haven't spoken, I don't think, for a while on how you're seeing that market, and of course you got the technology, which we'll talk about in a minute. But yeah, what's your kind of view on where we're at with that?
Yeah, I mean, I really celebrate many of the companies we work with as PlantVillage Plus, companies like Biochar Life, Carboneers, and many, many others who are out there working with smallholder farmers. And I think what they're doing is the hard work, which is to develop the trust relationships. I
Mm.
think the we often focus on the technology of Contiki kilns or methane slippage, which is precluding a lot of big customers like from Microsoft from buying. I think that'll be overstepped fairly quickly. If you look at what Carboneers is doing, I think that's really
Yep.
great. What you guys are doing is fantastic. We have our own technology as well. And so once we solve the technology issue, meaning we can produce biochar without producing a lot of methane,
Mm.
then it's really a fantastic playing field because you have Africa, for example, where 87% of the continent is within the tropics, meaning it just grows year round. And the size of that continent is just enormous. And the ability to turn waste biomass into biochar is huge. And so if we can have these modularized systems where farmers can use them or communities can use them, then I think we really get very close. And I've been really heartened by the recent purchases. So Google, of course, had this massive purchase from Varaha in
Yep.
India, where they 100,000 tons from the invasive weed. So exactly what we do. So that's great. And then more recently, they have a 1.24 million ton purchase from Exomad.
Yep.
And okay, it is Microsoft and they are 80% of the market, but they're really paving the way very effectively, and it is showing that biochar is absolutely the best durable in town. You know, you and I've said that for years and years, and not only because it's shovel ready and scalable as it's being demonstrated to be, but in the research that we do in helping people grow food. I mean, it's just accelerating photosynthesis like you don't believe. And now people have more crops. More crops is more waste biomass. More waste biomass is more carbon capture. So it's like we were, building DAC factories, and each factory gave birth to a new factory. Like a von Neumann machine. That's what biochar does in the global south.
Yeah, that's a good segue because I was about to ask you about DAC. But obviously, you're preaching to the converted. I'm a complete lover of biochar in terms of just, for me, it's a bit of a no-brainer. It's, not only does it solve this carbon removal issue, it has all these other additional benefits, but, the co-benefits around increased yields, increased incomes for communities. But what do you think is the love of the kind of higher tech methodologies? And I don't want to turn this into a bashing DAC and other things, but certainly I've seen some frightening figures recently in terms of, I think it was charm, just in terms of the number of tons removed over the last year. What is this love for technology? What do you think is driving it? Because for me, I think there's a place for it, but I don't think it needs as big a place as it has. And I constantly see these figures reported on this is what's been bought, and the figures you don't see reported is on this is what's been removed, which frankly is what actually matters, because what you sell means nothing. It's what you remove that makes a difference. So yeah.
Yeah, I think it's driven by the same issue which got us into the problem of climate change in the first place, which is greed. I think what they want to do is have a winner take all scenario, or a large company that not only captures carbon, or a large factory that captures carbon, but also prints money. And these are large VC backed organizations which see McKinsey report saying by 2050 the market will be 1.2 trillion dollars, and they salivate,
Mm.
and then they go forward and build it, and it's really easy relatively to convince a bunch of people of some rainbow far in the future, and if we go forward we'll get it. And either it's a Ponzi scheme, and early investors know what late investors will do, or it's just some sort of mass hallucination. But the thermodynamics just don't work out. And setting aside that, the economics. When I was we were part of the X Prize and did well. When I saw the Client Tech CEO on stage, I said, just on first principles, if
Mm.
I'm Netflix, for example, and I've got 2 million tons I have to buy this year, why in the name of all that is holy and sweet would I give you $700 or $1,000 when I can buy biochar for 50 or 75 or 100 or whatever, just first principles.
Yeah.
And then to tell me the better story, why put the carbon in a rock in Iceland when I can put the carbon in a field in Kenya or Malawi and prevent those most affected by climate change from going under in that season, because you're putting a sponge in the ground that also increases the pH of the soil and increases the nutrients and does a lot in terms of helping accessibility to those nutrients because of its principles. So the framework we have is that biochar is magic. It increases so many different things, and it should be celebrated for that reason. So there's lots of reasons, but fundamentally it comes down to greed. If you were being less charitable, you could just say delusion. But I kind of bet on greed.
I think you're probably right. I mean, I'm glad to say that here in Thailand, we're starting to finally see the corporate sector talk about biochar, and there's been no talk here about necessarily the high tech kind of areas, because actually we've got such a massive issue with smoke pollution that a lot of companies are looking at solving that at the same time as solving the removal of carbon. So yeah, there was a big biochar conference. Biochar to hit your net zero goals was the kind of title, but essentially all the talk was about smoke pollution, which is another benefit that you're giving these farmers a solution. So talking about sticking on tech, but I think more in your camp. So you've long been a champion of tech, and PlantVillage has all really been built around technology, data for the science community. What are you seeing in the technology space? And actually, maybe talk to us a little bit about the Biochar app, which is now out there. People are using it, and we see inquiries coming in. Where do you see technology aiding the kind of distributed model of biochar creation and carbon removal?
Yeah, so the Biochar app is out of PlantVillage at Penn State, and now we'll have the license as PlantVillage Plus, so we can charge people for it. It's a democratically accessible tool. It's available for all companies. It's used from Colombia to Papua New Guinea. Over 40 companies have been using it. All users, which are companies using it in order to verify their carbon, all users can see the data of all other users. And so we have this internal policing mechanism whereby company A will see company B's work, and then either give useful hints and tips, or just say, hey, I don't think this is correct. So we get that policing, which is really helpful. And then the data is all open. It's all available for, of course, the customer, the broker, but the independent scientist who would like to check, okay, you put all this biochar into the soil, and I know the soil is already pH 6.5. So what is the negative or positive effects of that? So we want to make sure that's all available. We do use a little bit of AI in it, but mostly we use really excellent humans, like John Mungai and Veronica and Tracy, who are just really there helping people understand this and then move through what is oftentimes a rather complex system. Going forward, we want to leverage that data to integrate more AI into the system, but fundamentally transparency. That's critically important. We consider it a public good. We want to make it as cheap as possible. So 1 ton of biochar recorded on our system is $2. We think that's very low. It could be lower, it could be higher, who knows? But everything will be done collectively and with the community. There's no subterfuge here. We're not trying to corner the market. We want biochar-based carbon credits to be as cheap as possible, and we want the software to be free. And fundamentally, we want a situation whereby you can offset your carbon on your next flight directly with some smallholder in some part of the world, all verified and understood by the global community that it's done well. And I think that's the world that we want to get to. Is what was in that Ministry of the Future book as a nice future, and it just removes all the middlemen who are rent extractors.
I know the Biochar app has been developed for a specific role, and around the tracking of the data for generating the removal credits. In terms of the long-term view, though, will you be gathering big data sets from that are useful way beyond just us as a producer registering credits? I mean, will you be kind of gathering more survey data, stuff that's useful to the science community, or will it just be kind of within that?
It is. So every location that a person uses it
Yep.
becomes a farm. And for us at PlantVillage, every farm then automatically pulls in about 40 years of data, 41 years of data, depending on where you are. That'll be the last 40 years of rainfall. We'll also pull in data from, say, Israel in the Netherlands on soil chemistry. We pull in data of the last 5, 10 years on crop productivity based upon satellite data, and so on and so forth. So there's a huge amount of data for every location.
Yep.
And that's important because then we can say, going forward, is that place likely to increase or decrease the production of green material through
Mm.
photosynthesis? And then we can start to look, and all of that data is public. So then we can have scientists look at this and understand, hopefully, that we're not committing some unintended consequence, or figure out ways in which we can put the biochar where it's going to do most good, and so on and so forth. So I think that's really has always, having been born at a university, it's always been the goal. The other thing I think is really exciting that some people are working on. Planbu do this, but we also do it ourselves. But using thermocouplers to measure the temperature.
Mm.
Once you do that, then you can really remove the need for so much photographs or imaging or checking, because it's pyrolysis. You want to go from 30 degrees Celsius to about 600 to 700 to 800, stay there for some period of time, and then decrease as quickly as possible. And that data can be easily captured and then stored on a server as well. And I think there's going to be ways in which, when we get to that position, it's going to be really easy to document that the pyrolysis was done correctly,
Yep.
and given the biomass that went in, the moisture and the temperature, it's just thermodynamics. Then
Mm.
we can say that the output is spent by this, and that will reduce again the exorbitant fees we pay to third party auditors,
Yeah.
in their carbon budget journey around the world, charging rent, which they shouldn't charge. And I wouldn't mind if everybody was selling, hundreds of thousands of tons of carbon. They're not. So everybody's paying this money, being held over a barrel, and the middlemen are getting rich.
Yeah, we are in an interesting industry where there are a lot of different organizations layer upon layer of doing different things, which, if you have the right technology at the ground layer, you can do all of this stuff, right? Which I think is kind of where you want to get to with PlantVillage and the Biochar app and
Yeah.
stuff. What are you, in terms of, just sticking on that, because a question I often get is more generally about studies around the impact of biochar. We talk about it a lot. I'm typically on the commercial side of our business, right? I'm a sales guy, and I'm always talking about how great biochar is in terms of yields. And I'm often using some of your great photos, and these are a few years old now, but the one with I think they're cabbages, where you're showing
Yeah,
that. I
yeah.
saw a really good video recently. I think it was the Exomad video where I think it was Sebastian from Carbon Future was pulling out corn from non-biochar.
Yeah.
Are there any, like, are we getting to a point now, not that biochar's new, but certainly the use of biochar in the last few years has been, I imagine, hugely prevalent compared to the last couple of decades. What are the studies like now in terms of really being able to show the impact on crops and land? And are there any out there? Is that stuff you're involved in? Yeah.
Yeah, there are thousands of studies, even going back a few years. They just were not so well known
Mm.
by the farmers, but there was one meta-analysis which was over 2,000 studies, and I think it was a 42% increase in yield. And then there's another one, I think it was about 40 papers showing a very large increase in water holding capacity. I think what's changed now is that more and more people are showing side by side images on the web. The one you talked
Yeah.
about from Exomad, the ones that we do, there's lots of people doing them, and it's really quite dramatic. And when you can show farmers that dramatic, and we're doing a lot of trials in Kenya and elsewhere, where we just show it through farmer cooperatives, they can see it with their own eyes,
Yeah.
and I think that's really pushing them. And why does biochar work? Well, it acts as a magnet, so the cation ion exchange capacities of biochar holds the nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium close to the root hairs, rather than washing away or going back up into the sky with intense heat. It absorbs water, so it acts as a sponge and keeps the water very close, especially important in sandy soils. It has all that space. So biochar has the same internal structure that the plant had, so lots of holes inside it. That's a great living ground for microbes, so it grows microbes. Um, it's very alkaline, so oftentimes in Africa, especially, the soil is acidic, so it increases the pH, which is an immediate win, especially because very low pH, the plant can also suffer toxicity from aluminium and other things. And then, of course, it captures and stores carbon in the soil. So
Mm.
MAGIC, biochar is magic. And just a simple handful of that is going to make a big effect on the growth. Now, the really wonderful thing, our colleague Dries Rubenbeck, who works with PlantVillage, he's done a 16-year study of biochar application in Kenya. If you add biochar this year and then you do nothing else,
Yeah.
16 years in the future, you still see an effect compared to controls because it doesn't go away. It's essentially coal, it's inertinite,
Yeah.
but it does provide all of those benefits I've just articulated. And so it has a compound interest effect. So farmers are really getting hammered with the high cost of synthetic fertilizers, especially as governments are pulling back from those subsidies. And so seeing these trials side by side, they're really pushing into it. And then you could, in our case, what we do is we add our bruscular mycorrhizal fungi. That's a special fungus. It's co-evolved with the plant. 80% of plants are evolved to have these associations. But what this fungus does is it unlocks legacy phosphorus in the soil. So you provide a living space, you put the fungi, and then the plants are just increasing yield by 60 to 100%.
Yep. And what about the durability argument? And I haven't seen anything on that now. There was a lot of, you see different people going back and forth. I mean, is there a general consensus now that if biochar is created at the right temperatures in the right conditions, then essentially the long term portion is 1,000 years plus. And I mean, I've seen some much bigger numbers actually in terms of how many years. I think it's very hard to put a nail in the ground, but yeah.
Yeah, I said this a couple of years ago at a conference. I always felt it was the delay tactic in the same way
Yeah.
the smoking industry put out nonsense to stop people, suing them, and then also big oil did the same thing. I think it was a delay tactic for people who wanted to raise funds for DAC and other approaches. 1,000 years is a long time.
Yeah.
1,000 years ago, my home city of Dublin was invaded by the Vikings. Where will we be in 1,000 years' time? I think if it was only 1,000 years, it's fine, but it is inertinite. It's a maceral, and the reflectance studies show its millennial stage. So basically, you're putting a rock in the ground. But who cares? It's cheap, affordable, and it's helping the people most affected by climate change. So for me, it was always a delay tactic for people to, raise funds for their magical machines in the north.
Yeah, I agree. And look, 1,000 years, I mean, there's a good argument to call that permanence because, yeah, like 1,000 years is a long time away.
Vikings.
What gives you hope right now in terms of the work you do, and what keeps you up at night? Two different pieces, I suppose.
So I'm always hopeful of the working man. I always think, and woman, I always think workers, farmers. I think that's the greatest force that we have at play, and especially in the global south. So I'm really, really happy and hopeful that because of this recent anonymous gift we got, and other sources of funding, that we will not have to chase those investors that I've just been bad mouthing for the last 20 minutes. so, so we don't have to chase investor dollars. So what we're going to do as Plant Village is form a worker cooperative. So
Awesome.
the workers will own Plant Village Plus globally in all
That's
the
a
places,
great
and
idea.
I think that's yeah, I think that's really great. There's so many examples. Mondragon in Spain is the seventh largest company in Spain, the biggest cooperative. They have an annual revenue, I think, of 12 billion. So the power of the people is great here. I think that's gives me a lot of optimism because the technology is becoming so cheap, whether it's
Mm.
AI or catalytic converters to remove the methane or whatever. So that's going to be solved. Modularity, like our machine that we have developed, the Pyrotar, it is 100 times cheaper than the Varaha machine in India.
Yeah.
Now just think communities could buy and own that, and they could have the app, and they could then sell the carbon to whomever they want. So that's very optimistic. What keeps me up at night? As always, I try to live in the future, and I just don't think we've fully conceptualized how bad the future is going to be. We thought World War II was bad. It will make World War II look like a walk in the park. The massive effect that people will suffer in the global south due to climate change. I mean, if you have temperatures of 50, 55, 60 degrees Celsius for multiple weeks in a row, of course, the crops die, but people cannot live in that way. And as an Irishman, we were colonized by you guys. But as an Irishman, I make the point about Europe being a colonizing force historically, and these debts will come home. The
Yeah.
chickens will come home to roost. Our Africa and Europe is 9 miles apart at the Straits of Gibraltar, and so having vast poverty and debt and destruction across Africa because of climate change will make World War II look like a walk in the park. And we have not conceptualized that at all. I don't think, and that's really scary.
And I mean, just to dig slightly more into that, and it is scary. Where do you see us tracking against the targets that we have, and what needs to be done to reduce the amount of carbon dioxide in the air, to reduce those temperatures? On the time frames which are very aggressive, and can those shift? Like where do you? We don't need to go into it deeply, but from a high level, where do you see that we're at in terms of making progress to kind of reverse that process?
Well, we're not nowhere near it. I mean, the amount of carbon we're pulling out is minuscule. None of us are stopping emissions. Everybody's still flying here, there, and everywhere, and doing all the stuff that people do, which is just human nature. Of course, we're going. Those with money will want to enjoy it. Those without money will aspire to have the lifestyles of those with. Um, the reversal of the United States in this arena is catastrophic.
Yeah.
I'm glad for China. I think China's done fantastically well, and will really help us through its approaches. But we are, and as IPCC and hundreds of scientists have talked about, we're on a path to 2.6 degrees Celsius. And that is not, that's abstract. What does that mean? We're currently maybe at 1.5, the way you look at it. But that's like living in a world where you routinely see people who are 10 or 11 feet tall. That's what it means. It's the
Yeah.
variance around the mean. It's not the average height is increasing, but now there will be worlds where people are routinely 10 feet tall, because in some periods and some times it's not 2 degrees above historical norms. There will be a heat dome, and it will be 7, 8, 10 degrees above historical norms, and society is just not able to adapt it. So, as always with humans, we're incredibly stupid, short-sighted, and selfish. And I just think that we will only act when it becomes so obvious. And then, of course, so many people won't act. People will have their own private fire brigades and fire services, and blah, blah,
Yeah.
blah. And that's where I think the only solution to this global crisis is to empower the working person with knowledge and the tools to adapt to climate change, because that's more important for those people, but in the process, mitigate. And our vision in PlantVillage Plus is a enormous mega factory spanning the tropics, containing hundreds of millions of farmers,
Yeah.
making biochar, and then reversing. Our mission is to eradicate poverty and reverse climate change. And the success rests on the global south.
Cool. Good vision, and something to aim for. A hell of a lot to be done to get there. But as we draw to a close, maybe a bit of an advice question. I mean, you're an academic mostly, but I would also say you're an entrepreneur, and probably shifting more and more into that space in terms of what you do day to day. If you're advising a young entrepreneur who's entering this space, post USAID, climate disrupted, digitally connected, where would you tell them to focus their energy to solve these problems?
Practical solutions. I think practical solutions with the thing that does the most work most quickly, and that has to be photosynthesis. So
Yeah.
any aspect of photosynthesis, you take carbon dioxide, you add water, you get glucose, and then you can turn that into biochar. So in the process of going to the biochar, you feed people or you clothe people or you use that. So operate around photosynthesis. Um, um, on first principles, try to understand the points of the technology where you can make a difference. So we build our tower in the global south in Kenya. There's lots of ways to do this, and there's lots of ingenuity in the system, um, and work towards maximizing photosynthesis and turning that into some durable carbon removal. And don't get distracted by LinkedIn. And don't get distracted by the nonsense that's on LinkedIn and the performance art that it is. Solve problems locally. Find somebody who has a pain point, and I think the entry point I think is actually not carbon dioxide removal and mitigation of climate change. I think the entry point is adaptation. I think that if you can help people grow food. So I always think about this, that if you the Brits had the Industrial Revolution. We started out with James Watt, the steam engine, and lights, etc. We didn't start out to get to 428 part per million in the
Mm.
atmosphere of carbon dioxide. We didn't. We wanted an easy life. Less horses, more trains, less candles, more electricity, heat, refrigerators. So we wanted to serve human needs first.
Mm.
Climate change was a side effect. And I think the reverse is true. Solve human needs first, and climate reversion will be a reversal, will be a side effect. So that means work with farmers, help them grow more food despite the challenges of climate change, but do it in a way that takes lots of biochar, sticks it in the soil, which is the durable removal at scale. Try to avoid all the nonsense about the price per ton, the money, Vera, Carbon Standards International, all that gang. Just avoid all the complexity.
Yeah.
Just find a customer and solve their needs. And there are a lot of people. There are 3 billion people on the planet who don't have enough food. And so there's lots of ways to solve that.
Cool. Good advice. Makes sense. And I agree. The whole kind of people centric focus, which is, why at Biochar Life, the social impact of what we do is so important, the community layer. So I didn't have any more questions. If there was anything I didn't ask that you want to, still add, but also after that, please, let people know where they can find out more about yourself, PlantVillage, the Biochar app, so, and PlantVillage Plus.
Um, I guess very regrettably, I would say don't pin so many hopes on government. I think the
Mm.
European Union governments are doing a good job, and I'm happy with that. I think Denmark and so on, Sebastian does a great job of really drawing attention to that. Of course, the United States is just in a tailspin, um, and and the reason is they're on a very different time cycle. They're a 4-year cycle,
Yeah.
and often they're not very knowledgeable about the problem. I think I think, and I also think that capitalism is bad. Um, so if we're in the end stage capitalism and we're heading toward, we got this massive income inequality, we're heading towards a revolution and so on and so forth. I think betting on solving people's problems with people is the way forward. And
Yeah.
I think we oftentimes look to either, big industry that got us into this problem, or government to be a calm response. But government is a bit busy at the moment. So I think that if you're an entrepreneur, if you're interested in solving this problem, come together as a collective. I love this Margaret Mead quote, the anthropologist. Um, Never underestimate the ability of a small group of people to change the world. It's the only thing they ever did. I think Biochar Life is a wonderful example of this. I think PlantVillage ourselves, we tried this, and there's lots of others. And imagine all those groups coming together. That would be powerful.
For sure. Hey, I said I didn't have any more questions, but I just thought one more. I mean, if you had to recommend one book for everyone to read, what would it be? Or it could be a couple, but
If you're starting out in this, if you're in the sciences, I think E.O. Wilson's Lessons to a Young Scientist is really important. I think that's really great in terms of helping people understand it. If you're thinking about the current situation of this, the gamification, the money, the VCs, carbon markets, etc. Then people like Mariana Mazzucato, the Big Con, which is on my shelf behind me, or Grace Blakely's Vulture Capitalism. These are really, really big exposés of the situation that led us to what is a global problem through global pollution. So I think we can't use the same solution that made the problem in the first place to solve the problem. So those would be two bookends, I would say. One for young scientists, and then the other is for people trying to navigate the world. Yeah, bet on people, and then if you really
Cool.
want, read Marx.
Okay, cool. Well, I'll for anyone watching or listening, I will leave a couple of links in the notes to the first couple of those books. And where should people find out more about yourself, follow you, get in touch if
Yeah,
they
yeah.
need to?
So plantvillageplus.com is our spin out from the university. And then also plantvillage.psu.edu is our university site. And it's confusing, but the one at the university is public good, and the one
Okay,
at .com is for scaling out. And I'm David Hughes on LinkedIn, and I think I've given up on Twitter. Yeah,
not a bad thing to give
find
up
me.
on. So
Yeah.
cool. All right, look, David, always a pleasure to chat and really interesting. And yeah, for anyone watching or listening, all of those links I'll put in the speaker notes. So
Great,
and
thank you, Matt, and thank you for really flying the flag for this really important work and getting people together. And if you're out there, reach out to Matt. He's very nice, and he'll have you on the show. So the more
cheers for
people
the
speaking about this, the better.
appreciate the plug and have a good evening.
Yeah, cheers. Thanks. Have a good day.
Cheers.